All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're talking about one of the most ambitious and, honestly, one of the most enigmatic rulers in all of history, Jayavarman VII, the great king of the Khmer Empire. His story is literally written in stone, but it's what happens after him, the silence, that's the most incredible part of the tale.
And this is really the central mystery we're trying to unravel here. You have this king who launches the most insane, massive building spree in Angkor's history, who totally redefines what it means to be a ruler. And then, after him, nothing. It all just stops. The historical record goes quiet. So the question that's hanging over everything is, why?
And this is the face of the man himself. You see it carved over and over and over again on the towers of his massive temple, the VII. It's the face of a Buddha king, looking serene, all-seeing. But behind that mysterious smile is a story of incredible trauma, a radical revolution, and an ambition so huge it would push an entire empire right to its breaking point.
Now, to really get this, you have to understand just how strange this silence was. For centuries, Khmer kings had a pattern. They built enormous temples, and they carved long inscriptions to tell everyone how great they were. It was just the rhythm of the empire. And then, after Jayavarman VII, that rhythm just ends. Just think about that for a second. No more gigantic stone temples reaching for the sky. No more inscriptions boasting about victories or good deeds. It's like someone just flipped a switch and turned the whole machine off. And to understand how that could happen, we have to go back and see the crisis that created him in the first place.
So where does a king like this even come from? Well, he didn't inherit a stable, prosperous kingdom. Not at all. He inherited a total ruin. He didn't just have to be a king. He had to be a savior.
Take a look at this timeline. After the king who built the famous Angkor Wat dies, things get chaotic. And then the absolute unthinkable happens. In 1177, their rivals, the Chams, actually sail up the rivers, sack the capital, and kill the king. An inscription from the time literally says the city was plunged into a sea of misfortune. You can't overstate the trauma of this event. It completely shattered their world.
And it's from this sea of misfortune that Jayavarman appears. He's the one who rallies the troops, kicks out the invaders, and finally takes the throne. But he knew that just rebuilding the old Angkor wasn't going to cut it. The old system had failed. The old gods clearly hadn't protected them. He needed a brand new idea, a totally new kind of kingship.
And his new idea, wow, it was nothing short of a revolution. He completely upended the religious and political ideology that had defined Angkor for more than 3 centuries.
This slide lays out the shift perfectly. On the left, you've got the traditional model, the Hindu god king. He's a devotee of a big god like Shiva, and his power comes from that connection. But Jayavarman, on the right, he flips the script. He presents himself as a bodhisattva, an enlightened being who puts off his own nirvana out of pure compassion to save everyone else. His power didn't come from some distant god, it came from his own good deeds and his mission to end suffering.
And you can hear it in his own words. This is from an inscription at one of his hospitals. This wasn't about being a powerful ruler anymore. For him, being king was an act of salvation. It was a personal, compassionate mission to save every single soul in his kingdom.
So, if you're Jayavarman VII, how do you go about saving every being from suffering? Well, you launch the most colossal, frantic, all-encompassing public works program the world had probably ever seen.
His building plan basically had 3 main stages. First, stuff for the public good. A huge network of roads, rest houses, and, get this, a system of 102 hospitals. Absolutely incredible for the time. Second, he honors his parents by building the famous Taprom temple for his mom and the equally enormous Presha Khan for his dad. And finally, stage 3 was for himself. His state temple, the Bayon, the one with all the faces, right at the heart of his brand new capital city.
Okay, but let's try to wrap our heads around the scale here. Check out this number. For just those 2 temples for his parents, inscriptions say over 300,000 people were put to work as laborers and staff. That is an absolutely mind-boggling figure.
And all those workers were supported by the resources from 13,500 villages. I mean, the entire economic and social structure of the kingdom was completely rewired to fuel this mission. Every person, every single rice paddy, was now serving the king's project to gain merit.
But, and there's always a but, right? When you mobilize an entire kingdom at that speed, something's got to give. He was already in his 50s or 60s when he took the throne, so this was a race against time.
He had to secure his legacy, and it shows. A lot of the building from his reign is actually poorer quality than earlier temples. The system was being pushed to its absolute limit, and the cracks were starting to show.
And here's the great paradox. This compassionate vision, this grand plan to save everyone, is the very thing that pushed the Khmer Empire to its breaking point. The sheer weight of his ambition started to crush the kingdom's foundations.
So what went wrong? Well, it was a perfect storm, really. First, you had the old guard, the powerful Hindu priests, who were seriously ticked off about being sidelined by this new Buddhist focus. Then, just pure exhaustion. The kingdom's people and wealth were totally drained by these projects. At the same time, a different, simpler kind of Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism, was spreading among the regular folks, creating a disconnect with the king's fancy state religion. And the most brutal proof of the backlash? After he died, thousands of his Buddhist statues were systematically smashed and defaced, a violent rejection of his legacy.
Okay, so let's circle all the way back to our original mystery, that great silence. What we've learned is that it wasn't a collapse, not really. Angkor wasn't just abandoned. It was a deep, fundamental transformation into a completely new kind of society.
This slide really gives you the before and after picture. The old Angkor was all about Hinduism and this elite Mahayana Buddhism. It was a civilization of all-powerful god kings who built monumental stone temples. The era that came after was defined by that more popular Theravada Buddhism, a less powerful monarchy, and a complete stop to building stone temples. The whole model of what their civilization was, it changed.
In the end, Jayavarman's reign was so intense, so all-consuming in its attempt to perfect the old system, that it basically burned the system out. He created a crisis that sped up the shift to a totally new social and religious order. So the silence wasn't really an ending. It was the quiet beginning of the next chapter of Cambodia.
So that leaves us with this final, really tricky question. What do we make of him? He saved his kingdom from total destruction. He built hospitals. He acted with what seems like real compassion. But in doing all that, he drove his empire to the brink and brought an end to the very traditions that made it Angkor. So was he a savior or a destroyer? The paradox of Jayavarman VII is that he was almost certainly both.